Okay, I hope everything's fine. So I've started the recording and I will share my screen. Yeah, great. Just a moment. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I see your screen.
Okay. That's great. So today's lecture will be short comparing to the previous one. Probably it will take about 1 hour or so because there is not a lot of material for this topic. And today we'll talk about the CSS responsive design. So let me start the slideshow. So yeah, we will talk about the responsive web design and about the adaptive design and their comparison between each other, about the goals of both adaptive and responsive approach to web design, and also a couple of words about media queries, the tools that help us build responsive or adaptive layouts, and a couple of words about the responsiveness of images. And let's start. So sometimes you can hear such words as adaptive and responsive, and there are different approaches of how they are defined. So if we try to give a definition to these terms, then we can say that both adapt the site design according to the device capabilities, for example, size or the type of display, for example, the Retina display. And so the goal is to make your website good looking and accessible for and like comfortable to use for every type and size of device. And when we talk about definitions, mostly people say that adaptive design is more about the server-side detection and about the different types of documents. So, for example, you use you have a completely different builds, completely different number of documents, for example, for mobile devices, and to show exactly the same content, you have different documents that show that are created for the desktop. And if we talk about the responsive design, we mostly talk about the media queries and some flexible layout grids like Flexbox or the grid layout that we talked about on the previous lecture, and some approaches like progressive enhancement and, for example, the mobile first approach, they lie somewhere in between. The history of how these approaches were created looks like this. So initially we had such web browsers like Netscape and Internet Explorer, and they rendered web pages as they did. So they had only the desktop type of pages. So probably if you used the internet some 15 years ago, then probably you remember how old websites looked like. And at the same time, the mobile versions of websites or the mobile apps, they existed completely separately from the web pages, and they rendered those some websites or mobile apps, they rendered them in like their own way. And with the time, as time was passing, these two types of technologies combined, and the adaptive design appeared. So we could create different layouts for different types of devices. And later, we had our modern responsive layout design, like that we use today. For example, if you have a website, it can be opened in completely different types of devices, and it still remains the same website with the same design as you created it. So, as I said already, the history went like this. So we started with desktop websites, and later, when the mobile internet was developing, we had our native mobile applications. Then we created the adaptive versions, which were different for different devices like tablet or some desktop computers. And then we created our responsiveness. So the responsive websites also appeared. So if we talk about the terminology, it's quite common to how to say, to differentiate the responsive and adaptive web design. So in this presentation, I'm talking about the adaptive web design as a different combination of code for different devices. For example, different documents, different CSS documents, even different HTML documents can be used here. And responsive is for media queries, for changing of layouts on different width of devices, and so on. It's also there is also a common approach, like another one. Some developers, if we talk about the responsive and adaptive web design, they define responsive design as changing of width of elements. For example, I have an element that takes 50% of my screen, and depending on the width of the screen, it changes its own width. And for adaptive web design, we use this. So media queries sometimes are defined as adaptive web design, not a responsive. But here in our presentation, we will define them as adaptive, as tools for adaptive web design. So we will talk about them later. There are also many approaches of how we write our code. So how we start creating layout, and the mobile first approach is also pretty common. So here you can see a quote from Eric Schmidt, a former CEO of Google, who said that mobile will ultimately be the way you provision most of your services, and the answer should always be mobile first. So firstly, you create a design for your mobile devices, and then you go and create some design to tablets, then for smaller desktops like laptops, and then for wide screens. So why and also, yeah, also there are different concepts. So it's not only about the design, it's also about the product creation. So if we're not talking exactly about web development, then even at the stage of the idea of your product, uh, many developers go with the mobile first principle. So the business and the production team focus on the mobile solution first, then the designers also start with the mobile and create other versions later. And if we talk about our work as web developers, then also we start creating our CSS with the mobile version first. Another approach is progressive enhancement versus graceful degradation. What does it mean? So progressive enhancement is a design philosophy that provides some basic content to those users who like for all users, and for those who have modern high technology devices. For these type of users, the range of services and the functionality of the product will be wider. So they can experience more features, they can use more tools. So for them, product will be different. So will be it will have more functionality, while all the other users have restricted functionality of the product. And graceful degradation, on the contrary, is a different philosophy. So it provides the same functionality for all users. So like the whole number of tools, functions, features, but for those users who use old, for example, browsers, old devices, this functionality will just work differently. So it still will be delivered, so it still will exist, but it will look somehow differently, and it will be optimized for their devices. And mostly, if we compare these two approaches, graceful degradation is more common because it can be created easily, and we can keep our product still useful to every user, but it requires higher maintenance. So if we compare graceful degradation and progressive enhancement, it will look like this. So this is graceful degradation. So it's like a whole building, which is big, and it has enough rooms, enough spaces, enough space, but it doesn't look very nice. While progressive enhancement, it looks like this. So for those users who use old devices and old browsers, the house will look like this. And for those who have modern devices, it will look like this. And yeah, this one is somewhere in the middle. If we talk about browsers, we, as I said before, we mostly use the graceful degradation approach, and we can still support every possible browsers, but for those which are old, we still try to provide as much support as we can. And so in most cases, we can do this, but the result, it won't look good. Okay, before we talk about the adaptive and responsive web design, do you have any questions on the approaches? So it's mostly about the, how to say, the philosophy of how we create our products, of how we do planning, and about the support that we provide to our clients.
If you want to answer the regressive enhancement or graceful enhancement, does it mean that we also need the more budget, more effort to build it?
For the progressive enhancement, you need to, how to say, to provide, to think about how can you restrict the functionality. So you need to define which browser or which device your clients are using. And depending on that, you need to check if they are able to see the content, or what features are they can access. And depending on that, you need to either restrict or provide the functionality. And graceful graceful degradation, it's more like how to say, it's more about the, for example, polyfills, or I guess I've seen this one more frequently, and it's rather hard to maintain because you need to provide all the functionality. But on the first stage, probably you need to, you just create your product, and I guess it requires less effort on the first stage.
Yeah, it's okay to me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. And if we talk about the adaptive and responsive web design, the approach that that we use here. So according to this approach, the adaptive web design uses the server to detect the device or the network or the browser that your client is using, and gives them different CSS files, different images, different features, different even HTML code according to what the device itself is. So you check you check the type of device, and you provide documents to the client accordingly. So it can be done on the backend, on the server side, and also on the client side. So it happens in both ways. And we will here today we will mostly talk about the responsive web design. So it can be described as this. So how it was created. So we have some website with news, and it has a wider screen and a smaller screen, and on mobile screen dimensions, it will look like this. So it doesn't look very nice. And yeah, you can also visit this link and look, take a look at what this website is. So responsive web design, it mostly uses the client side to detect the device features, example width, resolution, or the type of screen. And the CSS and media provide different user experience to your client with the different devices and different viewport widths. So yeah, as I said, we mostly develop responsive websites because we have different kinds of devices, and with the development of mobile technologies, the users started navigating through the internet with their smartphones. So the mobile development is very popular today. And also, if we talk about the adaptive websites, we also use the parts of the adaptive approach, just the server-side rendering or image optimization, but just a few things. And here we can see an example of how the responsive web design looks like. So here we can see a desktop version of the EPAM website, which if we look at it from other devices, will look like this. So here is the tablet view, and the menu is hidden as we see it. So we hide different elements for different screens, and for mobile views. We don't see for example, different blocks, so they can be just scrolled like this. And for example, here we see that the image is different, and these links, they go in a column. For example, here, I guess they would be going in a row. So that's how we change our layout for different screen widths. And so also we have different breakpoints. So these screen widths can be defined as breakpoints. And which go for different views. So it's pretty common to differentiate the extra small screens, the small screens, the medium screens, and the large screens. So the small screens, they go from 0 to 767 pixels, which are most mobile phones, from 768 pixels to 991. These are for tablets. Then for medium, 992 and 1231. These are for tablet landscape or small laptops, and large screens, they go for desktops. So somewhere in between, so as there are no 1024 different designs for a site, so if you for example get your design in Figma from a designer, then you will probably see three, mostly it's three, sometimes it can be 2 or 4 different views. So for example, for a mobile phone, for tablet, and for the desktop. And for example, you see a layout, so the design for a mobile screen, but it can be 320 pixels wide, and it can be also wider, for example, like 400. And you also need to think about how your website will look like if its width is different from what you got from the designer. So it's pretty common to use relative units, like you don't use pixels for width, you mostly will use percent or VW, VH, these units, so that your elements will become bigger if the screen is bigger, and smaller if the screen is smaller. So yeah, here there are some distinct views. Sometimes just a desktop and mobile view. Sometimes there is a tablet view, and you need to think how it will look on every type of device. Sometimes you need to collaborate with the designer and clarify some details, and also test on different screen widths how your website will look like. There is also a special meta tag which we add to our HTML page. So initially on our smartphones, each page automatically rescales to fit the screen, and if your page is optimized for mobile devices, you need to add this meta tag, so there are no side effects that your users can experience. So there won't be any zooming or something like that. Yeah, so we also can change the layout with different style sheet for different screen width, but mostly we use media queries, which is more easy to use. And also another thing you should think about when you do your mobile layout is that some features are not accessible on mobile devices. So for example, if you know the pseudo class hover, so uh, when you move your mouse and hover over like any element, it will behave in different way. So for example, if you hover over a button, it changes its color or something like that. Then you need to remember that on mobile devices, the hover event won't exist. So the users only touch the screen, and the behavior of mobile elements is different. So when you create your layout, you should also think about this. And another thing you should think about when you create a mobile layout is performance, because people who use the smartphones sometimes do it with the mobile network, uh, not with the Wi-Fi, which is faster. So the mobile uh, internet is slower, so you need to use smaller images so that they would load faster. Uh, so and to use other ways of optimization. And about the media queries. Media queries are CSS rules that we use to create different different CSS properties for different elements, like for different screens. So the syntax looks like this. So for example, this is your CSS file, and you're writing the CSS code, and you put this media screen and min width 900 pixels, and that means that the CSS rules that are put inside, like here, for these elements on the screen with the widths wider than 900 pixels, these rules will apply. So, for example, normally the article has some padding or maybe it doesn't have one, so it has a 0 padding, but on the screen with which is wider than 900 pixels. So for example, it would be wide tablet or desktop. It will have this type of padding. And it consists of these parts. So this is the media type, the logical operator. In this case, it's AND, the media feature, and some styles that go inside. More closely about this. So media types. So here we define screen. So these rules that go inside, they only apply to screens. We also have here print or speech or all, which means all devices. So print it's is used for printing. If you want to print your page or document, and speech is used for speech synthesizers like those that I showed you, the NVDA or JAWS, that help visually impaired, blind people navigate through your page. Logical operators are quite simple. So we can use AND to combine different features together. So this applies to screens with minimum width of 900. So all conditions should be matched. So it should be both a screen and with this minimum width. Not here, if we put not, so this rule will apply to all screens with how to say which don't have the minimum width of 900 pixels. So it switches this expression around. Only means that it's the rule that is used for older browsers that don't support media queries. And so this won't be applicable if you have an old browser. And commas, if you want to combine different media queries and create a single rule. So it can be screen with min width 900 pixels, then you can put a comma and another type of query, which can also be applicable here. So pretty much like the CSS, the comma in the CSS rules. Media features is the condition that goes here. Like we define the width of the screen, and here in brackets we put the number of what it should equal to. So if we work with different breakpoints, and for example, we create a mobile first layout, so we start writing our CSS. So by default, here, for example, we will write styles for our mobile devices, or in this case, they will go here because the minimum width of 320 pixels it goes for mobile devices. I'm not sure if devices more narrow than that exist. So yeah, here we write styles for mobile devices. Then we use another breakpoint, so which is tablet width, 768 pixels. Then we write a separate media query that goes below. So for the minimum width of 320 goes here, and then we write sorry, it goes with maximum width. So yeah, so we mostly can define either maximum or minimum width. So it doesn't matter what we write here. But it's common that like the more breakpoints you create, the more control you have. So you can create different designs for different different widths, and they will and you can define how your website will look like. So if we use what I was going to say, if we use the mobile first approach, we use the minimum width, and if we use the desktop approach, desktop first approach, we use the maximum width. So as I said, for example, we write default CSS code for mobile devices, then we write a breakpoint with the minimum width, for example, of 768 pixels, and write our code for tablets. And then, for example, media with minimum width of 1024 pixels, then we write styles for the desktops. And with the desktop first approach, it goes the other way around. So we write our desktop styles by default, then we put the maximum width of, for example, 768 pixels, and write some styles for the mobile devices, for example. So it will work like this. You can also create a range. So you can write styles for the devices which go between 320 and 768 pixels, so which lay in this range. But mostly it's more common to use either mobile first or desktop first. So it's a bad practice is to mix minimum width or maximum width or ranges. So it's mostly a better practice if you use only minimum width through your document or only maximum width through your document. So yeah, as I said, here it's also written. So you can use range only when it's needed, and we suggest that you don't mix minimum and maximum width. So you just choose one of them and use it across the document. Okay, so do you have any questions about the media queries, how they work? Always designed for 1280 or Yeah, so let me show you an example, just so that you won't get confused. So, for example, you have a div. For example, you choose a mobile first approach. So write styles for this div, like with 100%, height 100 pixels, and for example, background color just a moment. Not sure if it worked like this. Why doesn't it show me any?
You forget to put the column in the height property. In the height property, you
Ah,
forget.
thank you. Yeah,
I see that's from
sorry.
comment. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it has width of 100% of the body. So yeah, it looks like this. Then we write a media query. So like this, media main width. For example, let it be 600 pixels. Div, and width will be 50%. So if I start changing my the width of my viewport, then at some breakpoint it will change its width. And what I was trying to say is that this one goes by default, and this one will apply to all the screens which are wider than 600 pixels, and it doesn't depend on what the size is. So it can be 1000 pixels, it can be 2000, 4000. So if the screen is wider than this, then it will apply, the styles will apply, not depending on its size. And if we use, so for this is mobile first. For the desktop first, everything will be different. So if we put the maximum width, so on bigger screens, these styles will apply, and on smaller screens, these styles. So with the screen narrower than 600, then these styles will apply, and if the screen is bigger, so we will have our default styles. So going back to your question, with some bigger screens like 4000 pixels, it will be designed. So if you put the maximum width of 1280 pixels, and 4000 is bigger, then you should define the default style, which don't go in media queries, but they go here. So your default styles will apply for your wide screen. And if you don't define any default styles here, but you only have maximum width, then it won't have any styling. It will be just plain HTML. So I hope
Yeah, I understand. So
yeah.
I need to define max width is the 10 one thousand 200 like that. Define max width. So so
Um,
I have I have a
ah,
I have
yeah, I see. So if you have a max width in the body
uh,
for, and you have a wide screen, that it will be like your body in the middle of the screen,
yeah,
and like plain space,
yeah,
empty space.
yeah.
Uh,
So so I have a other question. So a browser if I use a browser is a 4K screen, so is it a bigger, so but my website is I think I think it will be less. All right, because the screen is bigger,
yeah,
so but my website is small, so it will be a left or a right or a center like that.
mostly developers put it in the center, but it depends on what your designer thinks about it. So yeah, mostly they put it in the center, in the middle of the page. And yeah, and as you said, it's a good uh, point, because you have to, for wide screens, you have to restrict the content area, because for the users it's more comfortable to read the content if it's narrow, so they don't have to look with the for in how to say to navigate with their eyes on the whole page.
I think
Yeah,
you can use some unique like viewport height or viewport width, so that the body will scale with the string you have, and it's not fixed width.
yeah, viewport width is okay, but mostly well, percent is also okay with in combination with max width, so it's also a common approach. So you have to define a max width.
Teacher, excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah,
As you say that we should design for the mobile first. So I think that the default style will be mobile, right?
yeah.
But when I design CSS, I see that it will be my laptop as default. The CSS will be some designed for the laptop first, then I will use the media query for my mobile. Is it right?
That's okay. So as I said, some developers use mobile first, some use desktop first, but you have to so if you use the desktop first approach, then you need to take the biggest design. So for example, if it is your laptop, then you create default styles for this. Then you go for tablets, and for example, then you go for mobile phones. So you go from biggest to smallest. or you go, if you use the mobile first, then you go from smallest to biggest. So it's not, it's a bad practice if you go from somewhere in the middle and then you write styles for mobiles and for desktops.
Yes, I understand. Can you show me the example that we use the default style for mobile? Because I understand that if we don't use media query, I can design for the mobile first with just my CSS without media query.
So the example, I guess I already showed you. So it's, well, it will be like this. So you use the minimum widths. For example, here you write the mobile styles, and here, for example,
Yes. So we must use the media query for mobile.
yeah.
Yes.
And for example, here you will write another media query, and here you can write different styles. So they go like from small to bigger, then to bigger. Or you can go from big. If you use desktop, there will be maximum width, and then it goes smaller and smaller.
Yes, I understand. Thank you, teacher.
Okay, thank you. I see. Oh, yeah. And yeah, you can use this button. Thank you. That's it's very useful. So yeah, if you want to inspect something, you want to look what your page will look like, it's this button here in the code inspector, and you can look at different widths of your page. So, for example, the mobile page and tablets, desktops, and etc. And you can even choose the type of device. So you can look at how your page will be rendered, for example, on an iPhone. So this is what the dimension of the iPhone are. So yeah, this button is very useful. Okay, we only have one topic to cover for today. If you don't have more questions.
I'm sorry that
Yeah.
the 1 pixel in desktop is equal to the 1 pixel in mobile.
Yeah. And we will talk about pixels a little bit more.
Yeah, and do we need to specify a smaller font size for mobile, or just keep 16 pixel for on device?
Yeah. So yeah, font sizes are probably the first thing that we change when we switch from mobile devices to desktops and other direction. Yeah. And yeah, if we talk about pixels, so what exactly a pixel is? So it's probably.
Oh, sorry. Maybe you need to sorry, render full screen.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, just a moment. Oh, sorry, not that slide. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this media queries and yeah, CSS pixel. So first of all, you need to know that there are different definitions of pixels, because there is a CSS pixel, which we use in our CSS, for example, as you said, for the font size or the width of an element or anything like that. So these are CSS or logical pixels. And if we talk about the responsive images, and we continue our conversation about the displays, then there is also such thing as the device pixel, so the a small unit of the device matrix. And for different devices, these pixels look differently and have the different size. And traditionally, it was true that the CSS pixels and the device pixels, they matched. So one CSS pixel equal to one device pixel. But with when the high resolution displays appeared, like Retina, for example, newer MacBooks or some devices like this, they provided a higher resolution of the screen. And for example, if for the standard screen, the device pixel looked like this, for the Retina display, it would look like this. And this unit of 4, it would still equal the CSS pixel, one CSS pixel. So this one is a CSS pixel, and here this square of 4 units, it is the CSS pixel, but it consists of 4 screen pixels. So this type of screens, they provide a better image quality, and everything that we render on these screens, it looks more, I don't know, nice. For example, like this beautiful image that can only be rendered on high resolution display. Okay, so sometimes if we render images and we want that our users who have modern high-tech devices like MacBooks or newer models of iMac, they can see, so they can afford looking at high quality pictures. We can provide this opportunity to them and change the type of image depending on what the user device is. So here, for example, if we see that the image is high, it has the high resolution than the box for this image. So for example, here it has 1500 and 690, so which is more pixels than the CSS pixels dimensions of this image box. And to provide this, we can write different conditions on which we can put a proper image to the proper users. So, for example, this here is a CSS code for one background image. So we set our default image, and for screens with high pixel ratio or with bigger resolution, like dots per inch, we provide different images with better quality. The same goes with the IMG tag. So here we provide URLs. So here would be the default URL to the image. And in the src set attribute, we add different screen width and different URLs that go to different images according to the type of the user's device. And the image that we provide, it can depend on the screen width or pixel density. So it can be either a large screen that we can render a better image on, or a pixel density like Retina Display. So this user can see better quality image. And also, it's not listed here, but you can look at the MDN and search for the picture tag, which is a more modern approach and is also used quite widely today. So we add a picture tag, so an opening and closing tag, and here we add a source tag with the image that we show on wider screens, like with minimum width of 800 pixels. And for the smaller screens, we show the default image, which goes inside the picture tag and in the IMG tag. So it looks like a normal IMG tag with all the necessary attributes like src and alt. And above that, in the source tag, we add all other images that we show for bigger screens. And this is pretty much from me for today. Do you have any questions? So as I said, today's presentation is pretty short.
I have a question that there's EPAM has a full-time team to work on CSS to design and maintain the website.
You mean the EPAM website or
Yes, the EPAM website. The EPAM has a full-time team to work on this.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I just don't know how it works inside the company, but I guess it's either like this, or probably some developers that work on other projects. They can also work. Maybe they can work part-time to develop their website. Unfortunately, I don't know because I've never I don't know, I've never asked that question.
To maintain a website like EPAM, do we need a lot of like effort to do that?
I guess it's Well, the EPAM website is mostly like a presentational website, and it doesn't have any logic inside. And I guess it's harder to maintain web apps, like like those that have more functionality inside. So
why do we need to create a web app for mobile device while we have some like specific app for mobile?
You mean apps like that you download from App Store,
Yes,
for
yes.
example? I guess that it's more comfortable to use it because there are technologies that are optimized for mobile development, because sometimes they are even written in different language. So, for example, you will study React, and for example, for mobile devices, there is another language that is more the React Native, which has like almost the same syntax as React, but it is more optimized for mobile development. So it's more, how to say, lightweight. And
Yes.
yeah, sometimes the technology that we use for web development, they are not optimized for mobile development. Yeah. Okay. So, any other questions?
Does the max width min width in meta vary is the same with the max width and min width we use in CSS style?
So the max width and min width, they define the width of the viewport. So it's more like, so here the viewport, for example, is this, or for example, here, let me close this. So here, this is the maximum width and the minimum width. So this is more like a condition. So if this minimum width is this, then render this. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same, but it's more like the viewport width. So we compare the viewport width with this value. Any other questions? Okay, then probably if you don't have any questions, let's see you on Wednesday. And I wish you a nice evening and good luck with your homework.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming here today. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, teacher. Yeah.